Hi, we are the Insightful Minds, and today we're going to be going over Chapter 9. This is about managing group conflict constructively and mindfully. My name is Sheena Burton.
My name is Matthew Stevens Eftekari.
Name is Juan Zarate.
I'm Miguel Espinosa.
My name is Amaya Wilson, and our group chant is Think
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 it
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 Get
through,
through,
thorough,
through, share
share
out
it
share out
out
loud,
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 communication
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 strong,
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 we
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 stand
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 proud.
proud.
proud. So, Chapter 9 has 5 sections going over what is conflict, myths about conflict, types of conflict, conflict types and computer mediated communication, and managing group conflict. What is conflict? A closer look into human disagreement. Introduction to conflict. Conflict arises when individuals or groups perceive incompatible goals, lack of resources, or interference in achieving objectives. It is a normal and expected part of group interaction, and it's not necessarily a sign of dysfunction. Conflict can arise during any group stage, but it often shows up during decision-making, role distribution, and performance evaluation.
more about conflict. Concept 1. Conflicts involve perception of differences and communication behaviors that either express or suppress it.
And there are many benefits to conflict. Conflict can promote critical thinking. It can encourage members to evaluate situations more deeply instead of agreeing automatically. It can also stimulate creativity and innovation. Pushing back ideas can spark new solutions or more effective strategies. Improves group understanding, clarifies different viewpoints, values, and assumptions among members. And it can also help to address any hidden issues that conflict can bring up, such as problems or concerns that may have been avoided or overlooked.
So, the second section in this chapter is about myths about conflict. So, the first myth is that conflict should be avoided. The truth about this is that conflict can clarify issues, improve decision making within groups, increase member involvement, and boost cohesiveness/unity between members.
Uh,
Oftentimes, oh,
Oftentimes, group members will avoid conflict because they believe it is harmful or damaging to the group dynamic. But in reality, it can be beneficial when issues are brought up respectively and constructively. Conflict can Conflict encourages sharing reasons for ideas or perspectives. It explains why, not just what.
conflict also promotes critical thinking and more thorough decision making as all sides and points of views are expressed and listened to effectively. Conflict can also increase group member involvement and create a sense of unity between members because everyone cares about what's going on and what they're working on. Um, Conflict isn't inherently negative, and when it's managed effectively, just it can enhance the way that the group communicates with each other and works with each other because you're discussing the things that you disagree about and what you want to change and what you can do moving forward.
And just a deeper insight around the myth to conflict, and that it should be avoided. This myth assumes that conflict is always negative, and, in reality, it's just a natural part of groups interacting with one another. And again, when it's managed well, it can just encourage growth and foster stronger relationships. And for example, like there could be, just like we were a whole team working on school, projects, and we have to learn how to divide the workload. And for example, one member can suggest, letting one person do it just to keep the peace. But when we do things like that, it just avoids the conflict, and then resentment can start to build up. And then essentially the final product can suffer, whereas if they just address the conflict, the project could have been more fairly divided. So that's just an example to keep in mind.
So, the second myth is that conflict is due to miscommunication. The truth about this is that many conflicts arise from differences in values or goals or limited resources and not just misunderstandings or miscommunications.
In situations like these, the issue is that both sides understand each other's perspective, but still do not agree.
So not all conflict can be fixed by talking about the disagreement over and over. To manage this type of conflict, it's important to identify the true source of disagreement instead of simply trying to find common ground where there is none.
So the last myth is that conflict can always be resolved if parties talk it through. The truth about this is that some conflicts, especially those involving core values or limited resources, may be unresolvable. Discussion helps manage, not always solve conflict.
In terms of resolvability, it truly depends on the underlying reason for the conflict. Conflicts within groups over goals can be challenging. For example, if you want an A while another member is dissatisfied with a C, and either side is not willing to compromise, conflict remains even if there is discussion. Discussing issues does not automatically imply conflict resolution. Discussion helps manage, not necessarily solve conflict.
Some conflicts, especially those like the core values and limited resources, aren't fully resolvable. So it's better to aim for managing the situation rather than coming to an agreement. Um,
Uh,
so
sorry.
it's
Uh,
okay.
Examples are myth one, conflict is harmful and should be avoided. Staff became defensive and started to place blame on each other for the scheduling issues slash scheduling process of the restaurant during a meeting.
They felt that the situation was harmful and saw conflict as negative until they worked through their issues constructively. Once the conflict was resolved, the group joked about it being the worst scheduling meeting and agreed to avoid a situation like that in the future. So this shows how conflict can bring a group closer if it's actually managed properly. And when handled properly, this type of conflict can help clarify workplace and group issues, improve the decisions made by the group, and make the environment more productive and easier to handle for everybody involved.
So the second myth, an example of the second myth would be conflict is due to miscommunication. And this was the classroom debate that was discussed in the textbook. This was discussing Obergefell versus Hodges, which is the same-sex marriage legalization. In this debate, each side understood where the other side stood, but there was conflict because each side's beliefs differed. This conflict was not due to misunderstanding or miscommunication, but rather by irreconcilable beliefs. In situations like this, conflicts or disagreements may be unresolvable due to core beliefs and values.
Myth three, conflict can always be resolved if parties talk it out. Conflict over core values.
When there is conflict involving core values like abortion rights, for example, talking about the issue will not resolve it immediately, as each side feels differently on when a baby becomes a person at conception or after. These two perspectives are irreconcilable, and the same can be said about other core values like political and religious beliefs. Discussion alone cannot resolve these conflicts. Instead, it manages them to allow space for different viewpoints.
Section 3 talks about types of conflict. So the three types of conflicts are task conflict, relational conflict, and process conflict. Task conflict is disagreement about the content or outcome of the group's work. Relational conflict is personal and emotional conflict. It often stems from interpersonal dislikes, personality clashes, or tension between group members. Process conflict is disagreement about how the group does its work, such as procedures, roles, or scheduling.
Relational conflict. Relational conflict is based on personal issues between group members. It involves emotions, values, and interpersonal incompatibilities, such as clashes in personality, communication style, or respect. An example of that is one group member rolls their eyes while another speaks. The person being dismissed gets offended and starts avoiding participation, believing their input isn't valued.
Causes could be jealousy or competitiveness, miscommunication or tone, or pre-existing tensions or personal dislike. Negative impacts include it can distract from the group's purpose, create tension and lowers morale, can lead to breakdowns in group communication and lead to group failure. And relational conflict is generally considered destructive and should be addressed quickly, often requiring conflict resolution or mediation.
So more on relational conflict. So relational conflict is actually the toughest one out of the three, since it's only about personal issues between people. It involves emotions, misunderstandings, and sometimes clashes of personalities. It doesn't really have to do with work at all, like the other two conflicts, but how people interact with each other. This kind of conflict is usually unproductive, which is why it's the only conflict that has negative impacts and no positive impacts. And if not addressed, it could harm the overall group, affecting the vibe, the tone, and overall everyone in the group, not just the people in the conflict.
Another conflict discussed in this section was task conflict. Task conflict occurs when group members disagree about the goals, ideas, or content of the work being done. It focuses on what the group is trying to accomplish, such as solving a problem, making a decision, or completing a project. An example of this is in a group project. One person may believe they should create a PowerPoint presentation, while another insists that a short video would be more engaging for the audience. Both want to do a good job on the assignment, but they don't agree on the best method to do so.
So the causes of task conflict. Causes of task conflict usually originate from different opinions on perspective on the best approach, or disagreements over facts, interpretations, or strategies. Conflicts in priorities or goals is also a reason why task conflicts could occur. Some positive impacts of task conflict is it could lead to better solutions through critical thinking. It encourages creativity and innovation, and it improves the group's understanding of the task. Negative impacts, if unmanaged, it can delay progress and may turn into a personal conflict. Out of the three, task conflict is pretty well for a group when tackled together. This conflict helps the group learn and actually create a very good solution where all group members feel listened and their input feels welcomed. To remember task conflict, remember it's about the what and the how. And this type of conflict usually usually helps the group a lot. So as I'm talking like about conflicts, process conflict. Process conflict is disagreement over the method of the process the group uses to complete its task. It focuses on how things are done, including leadership roles, decision-making procedures, and division of labor.
An example could be that one member wants to follow a strict agenda during meetings while another prefers open discussion, or some may feel the work is unevenly divided and it's unfair. Causes, disagreements about timelines, schedules, or delegation of duties, confusion over roles or expectations, and clashing preferences for organization or workflow. The positive impact is that when respectful, it can help the group run more efficiently. And the negative impact is if unresolved, it can lead to frustration, insufficiency, or resentment.
Process conflict also, what's it called? It's more about the way things are done than what is being done. Process conflict does sound very similar to task conflict, but task conflict is what and how, while process conflict is the way the things are done. So process conflict is the process to get to the end goal. And a great example would be like if two people argue about whether to divide the work equally or assign tasks based on expertise. That's process conflict.
Section 4, conflict types and computer-mediated communication. Compare and contrast of conflict, computer-mediated, and face-to-face groups. CMC groups show more inflammatory or emotional conflict at first. Face-to-face groups often show more self-control and emotional awareness.
Group support systems help reduce online conflict, and proper tech use leads to better communication in CMC.
Research has shown that CMC groups tend to experience more intense or emotional conflict, especially in the beginning. That's because it's really easy to misunderstand someone's tone when reading a message. Like someone might might just write okay, but it could sound rude or dismissive depending on how you read it. Also, when people communicate online, they might feel more anonymous or less accountable, which sometimes leads to more aggressive or unfiltered comments. Face-to-face groups, on the other hand, are better at picking up on tone, facial expressions, and body language. These little signs help people understand each other better and avoid unnecessary conflict. Now, something really helpful for online groups is something called Group Support Systems or GSS. These are tools designed to help teams organize their work and make communication smoother when used correctly. These systems can reduce misunderstandings and make group interactions more efficient so conflict doesn't get out of hand.
So, types of conflict in CMC. The first type of conflict would be relational conflict. These are struggles with technology, frustration, and miscommunication between group members due to that technology. And then task conflict, which are disagreements about how to complete work.
CMC groups show more relational conflict early on. Conflict reduces as members learn the platform. Relational conflict is the personal or emotional kind, things like tension, frustration, or miscommunication between group members in online settings. This kind of conflict can happen quickly. For example, if someone replies late or sounds short in a message, others might feel disrespected, even if that wasn't the intention. Plus, dealing with technical difficulties or confusion around the platform can also cause stress between people. Task conflict, on the other hand, happens when people disagree about how to get something done. For example, two people might have different ideas about how to divide up a project or the best way to present information. Task conflict can actually be productive if it's managed well, but in CMC groups, it can easily get worse if there's no clear communication or structure.
Managing group conflict. There are 5 conflict management styles, the first one being collaboration, the second one is avoidance, the third is compromise, the fourth is accommodation, and the fifth is competition. Collaboration, working together for the best outcome. There's high concern for self and others. It focuses on mutual respect, trust, and open dialogue. It involves brainstorming, active listening, and creative problem solving, and often takes time but leads to a stronger relationships. Collaboration focuses on finding a solution that satisfies everyone, building trust and long-term success in groups and relationships. Collaboration, which is often seen as the healthiest way to manage conflict, it's all about win-win thinking, both sides being fully heard and working together to find a solution that benefits everyone. In group settings, this means truly listening and not interrupting and trying to combine ideas instead of choosing just one. It's ideal, but takes time, effort, and patience. When people are willing to collaborate, it is usually leads to long-term trust and better outcomes for the group overall. Avoidance, ignoring the problem.
Usually, when there's avoidance, there's a low concern for self and others. The conflict is ignored or postponed. It can reduce tension temporarily, and it often leads to unresolved issues and frustration. And it may be used when conflict feels too overwhelming.
Avoiding conflict might reduce tension in the moment, but it usually delays resolution and can build up resentment between group members over time.
Avoidance happens when someone chooses to just not deal with the conflict. This is something that everyone does, and it might seem easier in the moment, but it can lead to passive aggressive behavior or miscommunication. In some cases, like when emotions are really high, it just can be smart to take a step back. But if avoidance becomes the only solution, it can lead to real issues that never get resolved, and group progress can stall. Compromise, meeting in the middle.
So compromise has moderate concern for self and others. Both parties give up something to reach a solution. Um, Common when time is limited and can feel fair but may leave both sides slightly unsatisfied. It also helps keep the group moving forward.
Compromise allows everyone to gain a little and lose a little, making it useful for quick decisions or share goals, even if it's not a perfect outcome.
Compromise is like splitting the difference. It's useful when you're short on time or when total agreement isn't just realistic. In a group, compromise might look like alternating responsibilities or picking a solution that's okay for everyone. It's practical and can work well, especially when stakes aren't super high, but it does mean that everyone walks away giving up something. accommodation, giving in to keep the peace.
Low concern for self, high concern for others. Prioritizes harmony over personal needs. Can be respectful or self-sacrificing. Often used to maintain relationships and risk of building resentment if one-sided.
Accommodation can help preserve peace in a group, but constantly giving in may lead to frustration or imbalance over time.
Accommodation means you're putting others' needs above your own. It can be a loving, generous move, like letting your teammate take the lead because you trust their vision. But if one person always accommodates, they might feel invisible or frustrated. It works best when used intentionally, not just to avoid confrontation, but as a thoughtful choice. Competition, asserting to win.
So competition consists of high concern for self and low concern for others. It focuses on winning the argument or getting one's way. It could be effective in emergencies or decision making. It may cause tension or damage in relationships, and it's often seen as aggressive or forceful in group settings.
Competition can help push decisions forward, but when overused, it can shut others down and hurt group unity.
Competition can look aggressive or bossy, but it's not always a bad thing. In urgent situations or when someone needs to take charge, a competitive style can push decisions forward. But in team settings, it can shut people down, especially if someone's constantly bulldozing others to win. It's powerful, but needs to be balanced with empathy. And working with conflict management styles.
So you want to first of all understand your default style and when it shows up. You want to choose your style based on the situation or the group needs. Staying open to feedback and being willing to adjust when appropriate. Mixing styles when necessary because conflict isn't just a one size fits all. And communication and emotional awareness are key.
Being flexible with conflict styles helps you handle disagreements more effectively and keeps the group balanced and respectful.
So, how do we actually work with these styles in real life? First, we have to get real with ourselves. What's your go-to conflict style? Some people naturally avoid, others compete. Once you know your instinct, you can learn when to switch it up. For example, collaborating might be the best for solving deep disagreements, but compromise could be more efficient for smaller group decisions. Being flexible and more respectful in how we manage conflict is honestly one of the most important communication skills that we can develop. And thank you for watching.
Oh.
We can